In my last video, I made this Tiffany lampshade. It was a real challenge and a process that I'd never done before. I really enjoyed it, but it does still need all of the solder joints tidying up and blackening. In this video, I'll make the base, which I'll start with, and then I'll complete the whole project with the shade and the electrics. I've made a 3D model with the shade, and I've done that to scale to give me a good idea of how it will look. I didn't add any details to the model, but I will be hand carving flutes into it after it's been turned. I've printed a full-size drawing which will be handy as a reference and to directly take measurements from. For the material, I'll be using this reclaimed silky oak, and the first thing I need to do is cut it into segments which I'll then glue together ready to turn on the lathe. I've already made the first cut on the end of the board. I've cut that at 30 degrees as there'll be 6 pieces to fit together. The original Tiffany bases were cast in bronze, and as cool as that would be, I'm just not set up to even attempt it, so that's why I'm making it from wood. And the original cast ones would have been made from a wooden pattern, so that's essentially what I'm making here. I need 2 layers of these for the very bottom of the base, and I'll cut the column afterwards, which will also be segmented. I'm making the base in segments as this will keep the wood stable. Any wood movement in it now throughout the different seasons will be consistent. If I'd used a single solid piece on the base, it would have more than likely deformed and potentially cracked. This reinforced tape is ideal for clamping the pieces together. You can easily put plenty of pressure on them. I first used this when making my kayak, and I've used it several times since, and it's very handy. When the 2 base pieces are dry, I will need to glue them together. While I'm waiting for that though, I'll cut and glue the column. It's going to be tight, but I'm hoping that I can just about get 6 segments from this piece, 3 from each half. To get 3 out of this piece, I had to slightly cut off one corner, but that's okay as the outside corner will get turned down anyway. I left them to dry while I went and had lunch. Next I'll glue the 2 base pieces together, but first I'll put them through the drum sander. I'm just cleaning the faces off the larger bottom piece, but the other piece I removed more, and I got it down to the final thickness for the overall height of the 2 pieces together. I have a coarse belt on the sander so it doesn't take too long. That's all of the pieces glued up, so let's get them on the lathe and start turning. Lately when I'm using the lathe, I set it up on my main workbench. There's more room here than in the corner of my workshop where it lives. There's also more light here and easier to film. I'm no wood turner, as you'd know if you've seen any of my past turning videos. I rarely use traditional gouges and manage with more scraping type tools. Most of them are homemade or cheap, and even though I understand that this isn't real wood turning, it still gets the job done. I'll eyeball most of this piece, but I will take a measurement for the thickness of the edge. My aim in sharing these videos is to try and make them helpful, even if it's just a small segment of a project that helps just one person. I was wondering if I could be even more helpful with any aspects that you may struggle with in making. Maybe it's about motivation, design, preparing for a project, or anything else that you can think of. Let me know and I can look at addressing the topic in one of my upcoming projects. That looks about right. All I need to do now on this piece is add some detail to the edge. There is one last thing to do before I take it off the lathe. I need to drill a recess for the column to fit into. I reckon the shape looks great, but it will look completely different when it's been hand carved. Anyway, now for the column. Now that the blank is round, I'll start to add details. I'll turn a tenon on the end first, which will fit into the base. I've left a bit extra on for now and I'll size it to fit later on. Next, I'll take measurements at certain points of the drawing, then cut grooves at those locations to the correct depth. When these are all in place, I can use them as guides to form the final piece. They're all done, but I did make a mistake. I cut one too deep. I have plenty of extra to take a slice off the end and then glue that in. First though, I'll have to turn it down to match my nearest Forstner bit. I'll use these old broken calipers to size it, which I rounded the tips off to use just for this purpose. I think where the mistake happened was by putting one of the legs of the other calipers in the wrong groove. Anyway, I should be able to fix it. When it's been carved, I don't think that it'll be too noticeable. Plus, I'll also be staining this quite dark to somewhat replicate the bronze look of an original Tiffany base. That was easy enough to fix, so let's finish turning it. You can probably work out how the grooves correspond to the drawings. I'll keep the drawings behind the lathe for reference while I turn it. I'm turning each section close and then I'll check over the whole thing at the end. As I mentioned, I'm not very good at wood turning, but it's something that I always enjoy having a go at. I should probably take a lesson and learn how to use proper tools. I have practiced in the past and got a feel for them, but whenever I feel like I've got it, I always seem to slip and ruin the piece. Using these tools here are fairly foolproof, so if you want to give wood turning a go, it's a good way to start. They just don't leave as good a finish as traditional tools, so you have to rely on sanding. The last piece, just above the tenon, will need finishing and transitioning into the base when they've been glued together, so I've left that a little bit thicker than needed. That's about it. It went pretty well, so let's sand it. Because the silky oak is old and very dry, I thought it'd be a good idea to stabilise the grain using some low odour CA glue. Most of the surface will get removed when carving it, but it may help to get a cleaner cut with that too. Before I start the flutes, which is the part of the project I've really been looking forward to, I'll size the tenon to fit the base first. I didn't show it, but it took 4 goes to get it to fit. I'll quickly sand and apply the CA glue to the base and then start marking out the flutes. To mark out the flutes, I'll use my rotary table from my milling machine with a dividing plate fitted. This is the easiest way I could think of to mark it out accurately. On the column, there'll be 30 flutes. With the dividing plate I'm using, that's 3 turns of the crank for each flute. I'll be hand carving the flutes, but I did consider setting up a router along with this setup. If I made a template to follow, I think it could have worked, and instead of marking out with a pencil now, I could have been directly cutting the flutes in. As I mentioned though, I've really been looking forward to hand carving them. They should also look better than a routed finish and more handmade. That's the column marked out. Now for the base, and something I didn't think about was the height of the rotary table. The base will have 60 flutes, so that will be 1.5 turns of the crank for each flute. The arms need setting for the half turn. This will keep me on track while rotating the head around to the next flute. This is the starting position, then I do a full turn and then do a half turn to the second arm. The arms can then be rotated around and set for the next division and so on. I could glue these together now, but I think it'd be easier to carve them separately, especially the base. With the column removed, I can come in from this way with the chisel to carve those flutes in. One thing though, the flutes do carry on up here into the column, and there's far too much left on there. That needs transitioning better on the lathe, but I'm going to finish carving them all first. I'll come so far up here, then put it back on the lathe, finish that transition, and then carve that last bit later. I'll just set the flutes in lightly first and then establish them more as I go. I'm trying to keep them straight to the lines, but it's easy to wander off slightly. I'm not carving too deeply though, so I can go all the way around and then on the next pass try and straighten out any wavy sections. I've done a bit of hand carving here and there, but I've never done anything like this with regularly spaced out flutes. It has the potential of looking a bit average if the flutes aren't consistent. I reckon one out of place could really stand out. That's why I'm carving in passes and not trying to finish each flute as I go. This way I have a chance to refine any that are starting to go off course. So far I've been using V chisels, but now I'll switch to a regular gouge. I'll use it upside down and start to round over the flutes. I'm calling them flutes, but I'm not sure if that's actually correct, but I don't know what else to call them. Again, I'm not going too far. I'm in no rush, so I'll take off a small amount and make as many passes as I need to refine them. Now I'm carving from the top, doing the same thing but with a smaller gouge. I can't use this method on the concave section in the middle, so I'll just take off the corners with the gouge the right way up. I need to carry them round into the edge, but before I do that, I'll use a riffler file and even out what I've done so far. They still need more refining, but they're pretty well set in, so next I'll tackle the edge, which should be quite interesting. I get a few comments here and there telling me to stop talking in my videos, and don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. Everyone has their own opinion, and it really doesn't affect me and how I feel. I just wondered what you thought about the voiceovers, as it would be much easier to make these videos without. I know it's not my best skill, but I've worked hard at it over the years to try and improve. Personally, I much prefer a video with narration. I don't understand why anyone would prefer to guess what's going on when you could be informed. Anyway, I just thought it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. I wasn't sure how the edge would go, but I worked out a system and they're looking pretty decent. Just like what I've carved so far, I'll go around again and refine them a bit more. I'm happy with that, and with some sanding they should look great. As I mentioned, the flutes do need to transition up into the column, but I'll carve the main section first before gluing the two pieces together. I was struggling to see my pencil line, so I swiveled the workbench around into a better position and then set up an extra light. Just like the flutes on the base, I'm just setting them in lightly. That went well. I'm not sure if I'm just getting the hang of it or if these ones on the column are easier. Anyway, I'll keep going and refine them. I hardly need to take anything off where they're tight together, but the flutes will gradually get deeper towards the end. That's 3 passes. They're all set in. I just need to round them over. That's one end done. I'm very happy with that, so let's do the rest. To give you an idea of how long the carving is taking, to this point it's been 3 days, including both the column and the base. Next I'll glue them both together and finish the transition. I left it to set while I had lunch, so now I'll put it back on the lathe and blend the base and the column together. While it's on the lathe, I've decided to drill a through hole now, and that's for a cable to pass through for later on. It's not very concentric, and I was hoping that the drill would pick up the centre mark and straighten out, but it didn't. I'll try and straighten it a touch by using a cordless drill and put a bit of pressure in the correct direction. After starting the hole with a regular drill, I'll continue with this long bit. It's a cheap one and it's not very good, but it's been handy for the odd project over the years. I reckon I should have just drilled it by hand from the start. It's actually pretty easy to sight along the column and keep it straight. The drill bit worked well enough even if it isn't the best, so next I'll finish carving the flutes. As I mentioned, it's taken a few days to carve, but the whole thing still needs sanding, which isn't going to be a quick task either. I did one round, then removed the dust and went round again, and I did this enough times that I lost count. I thought the edge was going to be difficult to sand, but it wasn't actually too bad at all. I really do like a hand carved finish, but this isn't the right project for that. A Tiffany lamp needs to be more refined, so however good the carving is, it would still need to be sanded. It's a bit of a chore and it's not fast, but an audio book helps to pass the time. That's the first round of sanding done. Next I'll apply sanding sealer to fill in the grain, and when that's dry I'll sand the whole thing again. The sealer takes 6 hours to dry, so I left it overnight. The first round of sanding before the sealer was just to even out any humps and bumps, but now with some wire wool I'm just getting it to a good smooth finish. It took over a day to sand. I went over and over again making multiple passes, so next I'll apply the stain. As I mentioned earlier, I want to make it dark to look more like the original bronze bases. It will still be a wood stain finish though, and not a fake bronze finish, just a similar shade. I'm not sure how I'll finish the bottom yet. I may carve away a recess, that's why I'm not staining the middle. Another option is to add feet, but I haven't decided. While that's drying, I'll move on to the light fitting itself. My mate Tori found this ceiling fan being thrown out on a job site he was working on. The light fitting on it will be perfect. The earth runs down the outside of the threaded section, which I was going to use to fix it to the base. There's not enough room for the earth to go down the inside, so to fix the issue, I'll make a brass piece on my lathe. It needs a coarse thread on the outside and an M10 fine thread to match the light fitting on the inside. I need to make a nut, so I'll turn and part off a piece at the end. This will all make more sense in a moment. It just needs a couple of flats on each piece to get a wrench on, and then they're both done. The idea is now I can attach the earth to the end of the threaded section, and the larger M16 thread will be better for screwing into the base with its coarser thread. I just need to drill and tap the base to fit it. I'll glue in a plug so I can center the hole better. Before I tap the hole, I'll stabilise the wood with thin CA glue. This should prevent the grain from breaking away too much. I'm starting the threads on the drill press to keep them straight, then I'll finish them with a wrench. I don't have a tap wrench big enough for this M16 tap, so I'm managing with a socket wrench. I'll stabilise the threads again, and that bit's done. Now I need to make a piece to screw into the top so I can attach the shade. I did that off camera as it's a pretty basic piece. I reckon it's looking pretty cool. I just need to make a finial for the top, and that will also secure the shade onto the base. It's starting to come together, so now I have to make a decision whether to add feet. The cable needs to come from underneath. I could carve a groove for it to sit in, but that would also come through the edge. I've decided to add feet. There'll be balls, which some original Tiffany lamp bases had. I'll start by turning a dowel out of a piece of silky oak. I'll turn the balls on the end of the dowel, so I'm cutting them into short lengths to get one ball from each end. I need 6 balls, but I'll make 8 and I'll pick the best ones. To refine the radius, I've taken an old plane blade and ground in a recess, which I think should work well. They're not too bad at all, and they didn't take long to make. I'm using the joints in the segmented pieces of the base for the position I need to drill, and as you've probably worked out, they're for dowels. I waited for the stain to dry, so now I can finish it, and for that I'm using clear satin spray. I'll keep adding more over the next couple of days, sanding between coats. While I'm waiting for it to dry, I'll start fixing up the solder joints on the shade from the last video. I spent a day on this and also putting lots of coats on the base. The joints aren't perfect, but they're definitely better than before. I reckon I'll do a better job next time I make one, but this isn't too bad for a first go. Next I need to give it a thorough clean to remove all of the flux, then I can blacken it with a forced patina. I did the inside as well and also gave it a good rinse with the hose off camera. The last thing to do to the shade is wax it. Just the finial to finish and then I can start to put it all together. The wiring is pretty simple and something I can do even though I'm not very good with electrics. It's something I don't really fully understand, but I learnt to wire a plug when I was a kid and it really isn't difficult. Even though I have no concerns about connecting this, I did have a rethink and I thought that I should be more responsible as this is being published and I wouldn't want anyone to do the same and electrocute themselves. Here in Australia, this should be done by a licensed electrician anyway, so my mate Scott came out and checked it over for me just to be sure. He redid everything and installed the switch and the plug. Anyway, let's switch it on and try it out. It's been a pretty full-on project, but I thoroughly enjoyed the whole thing, from making the glass shade and learning about that to wood carving. I could definitely do a better job and I'd love to try again. That doesn't mean that I'm not happy with it though, as I'm absolutely thrilled with the outcome. And the main thing about making is the pleasure you get from the process, even more so than the final product. The crazy thing is I've spent the best part of the last 2 months making this and I don't even know where it's going to live, but I'll find somewhere. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching and I'll see you on the next one.